The Honourable, if you allow me to call you that, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, very, very happy to be here.
Yeah, so just a quick one. I mean, you travelled all that way here to South Africa. Why?
For a number of reasons. I was happy to be invited to participate in a youth expo and career fair that's happening right here in Johannesburg. That really looks at skills labor, the fourth industrial revolution, what does it mean for youth, different ideas at youth unemployment and how we can share best practices. So clearly from where we stay in Jamaica, we have always tried to see how we can, as much as possible, lead the world in relation to our youth development models. And we've always had a very, very close connection with South Africa. And as such, when I went to the Commonwealth Youth Ministers meeting, we started a conversation in relation to how could we have closer ties with South Africa. You know, Jamaica was one of the first countries in the world that did not support South Africa when it had its apartheid regime. And when Mandela got out of prison, one of the first places that he came to was actually Jamaica. He visited in 1992, and for us it was a massive event. I mean, it was almost like a holiday when he came and he spoke. So we've always had that bond. I was sharing with the conference yesterday that actually one of our main thoroughfares in Kingston is named after Nelson Mandela, Mandela Highway. So we wanted to see, and the team here, led by Cindy Ross, said it would be good to see how we could share best practices. All
right, because I want to talk about those best practices. I understand that unemployment in Jamaica as a whole now has come down to around 10%. Yes. And this is the lowest levels you guys have had in almost 10 decades. Years. Yes. Except your youth unemployment is sitting at 25%. So please explain to me the disparity between those two figures.
So one of the things that we see worldwide is that unfortunately youth unemployment trends higher than the unemployment of the entire population. So it is a distinct issue that you have to give targeted focus. When we started out as a government, we were a new government, we were elected in 2016, our youth unemployment rate was sat at about 33%. So over the last 2.5 years, we've moved that to 25%. So it is still too high, we would say, but we have seen significant improvement. How have we done that? One, we've looked at education and training. So we've tried to close the gap to ensure that the young people who are not qualified, that they can access more training. So we've ramped up our training programs, and we have actually said that we don't want any person leaving secondary school without at least having a skilled area, so that they can then go into at least an associate degree. So we have a program called the Career Advanced Placement Program, which places them on that path. But additionally, there are people who are out of school and not on employment. So we have targeted, we call them unattached, underserved youth. So we've targeted them in a program that we call HOPE. And what we really do, it's a 1-year internship where they get a stipend. They're placed in employment for a year, but most importantly, when they finish that year, they're certified. And it has a mandatory saving component. So at the end of the year, even if they don't move into permanent employment, they have savings to fall back on.
That's interesting, because we've got a similar scheme currently underway here in South Africa, recently launched. It's called the Youth Employment Services scheme that the government has tried to partner with the private sector to do, so bringing youth into internships and all that. But I'm not too sure we've got a mandatory savings component. So explain to me what the effect of that has been.
So the underlying policy directive, which is through our ministry, which is Education, Youth and Information, is what we call a strategy called LEGS. Which is learn, earn, give, and save. So the program has 4 basic components. One, you must learn, and as such, you have to be certified at the end of the year. So even if you start with no certification, even if you're doing document digitization, at the end of the year, you must have a certification that can move you into further study. Clearly, you must earn, so it's a stipend component that comes with it, but you also have to give back. So there's a mandatory voluntary component, and you must do voluntary hours for the year. And then importantly, out of all your pay, there is a mandatory savings. So you don't get it. You don't get it until you finish the year, you're finished with the program. So even if you're moving into permanent employment, you get your savings. If you're not, you have that to follow back on. And we see that has changed how the young people approach the world of work, right? And we're trying to create a culture of saving, which we think is very, very important, but also it gives them greater stability.
How much is saved? What's the mandatory savings?
The mandatory savings, I probably would give you in percentages, about 10 to 15% of what you get as the mandatory saving component, right? So it has worked. And then we've had other programs. So what we're doing across our youth development landscape is that our centers, we used to have youth information centers, which are centers for youth to go and to get information. We've transformed those. What we're doing is what we call innovation centers. So the focus is on business. We want to have young people, especially especially in rural Jamaica, in the countryside, who have business ideas, to have a framework that they can go into our centers and transform those ideas into plans and then match it with funding so they can actually establish businesses. And what we're doing, we look at niche markets. So for example, our center in an area that we call Spanish Town is a very lively city, known for the creative industries, has produced a number of musicians. We just opened a recording studio in our youth center. So we're saying to our young people, this can be a pathway that you can have gainful employment. So it's not just traditional forms of employment. We believe that anything that's business, anything that can take our young people off the street, is something that the government should support.
I mean, Jamaica, just like South Africa, has got, economic growth is set to improve this year for you guys and us, but it's still slow. And so my question to you, a parting question, is how are you, within the constraints of a slow economic growth, how are you preparing young Jamaicans for the jobs of the future? You did highlight the fourth industrial revolution briefly, but how are you ensuring that they're, you know, will be competitively able to compete with the kids in the US or in China or even in Korea?
Well, first is to adequately identify what those jobs of the future are, and then to ensure that we have training programs that align. We have spent significant time over the last 2 years, I would say, reculturing our society to what jobs are important, where we have the need, where the world is going, especially in relation to technology, and to ensure that we have the training programs from as early as secondary school that ties into it. So what we have seen, the jobs of the future require high levels of skills training. So we have a National Skills Training Institute, and what we're now doing is ensuring that the young people are introduced to those skills from secondary school. We also realize the jobs of the future require much more soft skills, much more independent thinking. And as such, we've revitalized and reformed our curriculum at the secondary to say we're producing more young people that can go out into the world of their own. So we've now introduced entrepreneurship as a mandatory course in our secondary schools. but all of this is in the context of where we've really been working over the past, I would say, decade or 8 years, since 2009 when we re-entered an agreement with the IMF to stabilize our macroeconomic front, and we have seen significant gain in that. So now we have stability, our reserves are up, our inflation is down, but now we're driving now for growth. And the only way we can really drive for growth is, one, through investment. So clearly, part of why I'm here is also to engage the business community. We're looking to set up business exchanges among our young entrepreneurs. We believe, one, South African entrepreneurs have a lot to share, and we can share as well. Plus, we're seeing how can we create a framework for investment through South-to-South cooperation. Oftentimes we look further afield. We look to the United States, we look to Europe, but we don't look among our African partners. And we want to change that framework. But finally, the investment in the human capital. So we have ramped up all our programs. We've ramped up our work experience. We have a summer work experience program, and our numbers clearly are small as we're a small country. But we used to do, just to give you some context, we used to do 6,000 young people for summer work experience. We've ramped that up to 14,000 because we see work experience as a significant part of determining the future of a youth in relation to further employment. So it's a holistic approach.
Wow. Sounds like a very exciting approach, and I'd love to hear more, but unfortunately we are out of time. We'll leave it there for now. Many thanks to Jamaican Youth Minister, the Honourable Floyd Green.